closing is difficult, and what are the buying signals that you should identify before you transition to the closing stage, and then some closing techniques that you can apply to make sure that your selling becomes fruitful by getting to the closing stage and helping the client make a decision. So let's start by definition. What is closing? What is closing? Closing is sale. Yes, what is closing? Closing is professionally using a person's desire to own the benefit of your product or service, blending it with your sincere desire to save in helping the person make a buying decision that is good for them. When you follow that process, you are actually closing a sale. So it's basically using your desire to help the client also fulfill their desire to own your product. So why is sales difficult then? So if we say it's a matter of blending the prospect's desire to have the benefit of your product and your desire to also help the client make a decision that is good for them, why is it the most difficult stage of the buying process? It's difficult because it's the most stressful part for both the prospect and the salesperson. Why? Because they've now come to the stage of making a decision. So it's stressful on the part of the prospect because they now have to make the decision to part with their money. And that's not an easy decision. On the part of the salesperson, it's also difficult because they are bringing the prospect to that stage where they need to make a buying decision. Now, 80% of sales are lost because salespeople are not courageous enough to get to that point of closing, which is basically asking for the sale. Why is it difficult? Prospects also have had negative experiences before. So the moment they get to the buying stage, they start to think about other bad choices that they made or bad decisions that they made in terms of purchasing. And if it's an organization and they are buying on behalf of the organization, they also have that fear of making a wrong decision. And because of that, the salesperson now has to be strong and bold in terms of guiding the prospect to make the buying decision. On the other hand, fear of rejection accounts for the majority of salespeople's failure to ask for the sale, because when they get to that point now, a prospect might just decide not to buy, or the prospect might say no, and because the salesperson is afraid of hearing the word no, they then just decide to leave it as it is. I remember when I started in sales, when I was selling insurance services, I would make a presentation, and after the presentation, I would say, so these are our contact details. When you've made your decision, you can always contact us, and we'll be more than happy and willing to assist you at offer. And now, with the understanding that I have about sales, I look back into those days and say, I missed a lot of opportunities. Because I remember, after I learned about closing the sale and the importance of closing, I decided to try it at one point. I said, so are you happy with this so far? And the client said, yeah, we're happy. And I said, so can we go ahead? The client said, yes. So I thought maybe the client didn't understand what I'm saying, because for me it was not normal for the client to just say yes, yes, yes until we get to the closing. So I thought maybe they didn't understand. And I said, I'm saying, are you ready now to buy our product? And the client said, yes, we are ready. And they gave us a payment. And we got the client. It was like, wow. So this stuff works. You just have to learn how to close the sale. So closing is difficult, but it's important. Why is it important? You want to help the prospect rationalize the buying decision that they already want to make. I'm sure you know that people buy for emotional reasons, but they want to rationalize that decision. So if you are the salesperson now, you are simply there to help them make sense out of that decision and show them that their decision makes sense. When you do that, you are helping the client to close. Then the other reason why closing is also important is that you want to help the client deal with procrastination. Because whenever a prospect has an opportunity to procrastinate the buying decision, they'll simply do that. They'll say, okay, we'd rather buy tomorrow, we'd rather get it later. So people will always want to procrastinate, and you are there to guide them out of procrastination. Then the other reason why it's also important to close the sale is you want to help the client deal with their fear. Remember, we just talked about the fear that prospect has when it comes to the buying decision. So you want to help them deal with that fear of buying a product that might not help them, or getting a service that might not be adequately addressing their challenges. So you want to help them deal with that fear. And then lastly, you want to help them deal with indecision. There are people who just find it difficult to make a decision. They want someone to come and push them into the decision or support them in making the decision. So closing is most important because it helps you in all those aspects and helps the client to make the best decision that is good for them. But without a closer, that might not happen. So how then do we transition from the presentation stage into the closing stage? What you need to do is to master buying signals, because a lot of salespeople talk themselves out of a sale. Because the prospect is now in the buying mode, you keep presenting until they are out of the buying mode and you lose the sale. So you need to be able to identify what we call some buying signals. And once you identify buying signals, you have to switch automatically into closing. There are some non-verbal buying signals that you can detect. And on the other hand, there are also some verbal closing signals. So let me start with sharing with you some non-verbal buying signals that you should be able to identify so that you know, wow, we are about to close. You may see the prospect nodding their head in approval. And if you notice that, that might be a buying signal that the prospect is now ready to advance with the purchase. Or sometimes you may see some smiling and nodding again in approval. Then you can tell that the client is satisfied. In other words, the client is saying, yeah, I've gotten what I was looking for, I've gotten what I wanted. So there's a smile that you can pick that the client is happy, is satisfied with what I'm offering to them. Then sometimes you may see some prospects taking some notes, right? Those are also signs, those are also buying signals. I remember even when I was doing some interviews, I remember it was my first interview for my first job. I was coached into how to answer some interview questions. So as I was answering, I would see them nodding their heads and also taking some notes. And I said, I seem to have got it. And now as I am in sales, I look back into that scenario and I realized those were buying signals that they were showing me. And for sure, they hired me. So you need to be looking into those buying signals. Then you might also see your prospect leaning forward. Leaning forward is a sign of heightened interest. And when you see that, quickly switch to the closing mode. Because remember, your main aim is not to finish your presentation, but is to close the sale. So you should be a master at reading body language if you are in sales. Because if you don't read body language, you might leave some clues that are actually directing you towards what the client wants. And then, looking at the verbal signals, the client might ask you, how can we own this? Or how will you be able to deliver? When they start asking about delivery details, delivery dates, then you know they are ready to make a purchasing decision or they are ready to make a purchase. So you have to stop there and start closing. I remember at one point I was in a board meeting selling my sales training services, and I remember the CEO saying, okay, what we want you to do for us and our team is, then I knew these are buying signals. They are ready to move ahead, and I stop everything and focus on closing the sale. It was very easy to close that sale. Then you also need to see when the prospect starts asking about the price, about discounts, or payment terms. Then you should know this prospect is now ready to buy. Or the prospect might start asking about the next steps. So what then should we do from here? How can we proceed? Then you know they are also ready to buy. Sometimes they might talk about involvement of other decision makers. That also is a sign that they are ready to move on to the closing stage. Or they might shift their language. Instead of talking about, if we get this product, if we get your service too, they might then shift to,